continuing in the same general direction, the same theme that we started with last evening. We look around at the world and at times can become very frustrated. It seems that so many things are going wrong. So many things are not what they should be. You have to admit that as you look at the whole spectacle of the world's woes and troubles, it seems that a lot of that is focused in that part of the world, in that specific geography of the Middle East, that holy ground, Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, that whole region. This is not a coincidence. Do not think for a moment that this is merely a coincidence. Not a coincidence. This is a definitive, a decisive point that we've come to in history. I believe, and I don't know how or when exactly, but I believe that things are converging now, and you don't have to believe me at this point because I'm not giving you church doctrine at this point. Usually in my preaching and teaching, it's based on the doctrine of the faith, and that you do have to accept if you're Catholic. This, you can take or leave. You don't have to believe it. But every once in a while, I take the liberty of giving what I think is an educated opinion, a spiritual opinion of the direction things are going in. And I don't think in this case I'm going to be wrong. I've rarely done that where I'll go out on a spiritual limb, so to speak. I've never been wrong yet when I've done that. I've done it very few times, though. In 1952, the great Archbishop Sheen wrote this: "At the present time," 1952, "the hatred of the Muslim countries against the West is becoming a hatred against Christianity itself. Although the statesmen have not yet taken it into account, there is still a very grave danger that the temporal power of Islam may return, and with it the menace that it may shake off a West which has ceased to be Christian, and affirm itself as a great anti-Christian world power. Muslim writers say that when the locust swarms darken the countries, they bear on their wings these Arabic words: 'We are God's host.' Each of us has 99 eggs, and if we had 100, we should lay waste the world and all that it contains." The problem, Bishop Sheen said, is to prevent the hatching of the 100th egg. Bishop Sheen believed, this is 1952, Bishop Sheen believed that Islam would be converted through the Blessed Mother. He dedicated an entire chapter of his book on the Blessed Mother to, it was entitled Mary and the Muslims. That was the title of that chapter in 1952. Mary and the Muslims. Now, we always have to stop and ask ourselves something. No matter what we're talking about, when we're dealing with something difficult, something we don't understand, something we don't agree with, whatever it is, whenever it involves humanity, I try to do this myself. Step back and say, does God love them? And you always have to say, yes, of course. That's a no-brainer. Does God love all the Muslim people? Yes, absolutely. God love all the Jewish people? Yes. My boss is a Jewish carpenter. You know? Jesus, his origin, the human origin, I mean, we know he's the eternal Word. He's a divine person. But when he assumed a human nature through the fiat of the Blessed Virgin Mary and the power of the Holy Spirit, when he became like one of us in everything except sin, that the human nature that he assumed was a specific human nature. It was a Semitic human nature. Jesus Christ is a Jew. That's a fact. That human nature, let me tell you, when Jesus walked in Palestine, this may sound funny to you, I'm just trying to make a point, I might not quite make it, but he didn't look like a Nordic person. He was a Semitic person. Now, obviously, God encompasses all of humanity, loves all of humanity, no question about it. Jesus Christ is a Jew, in plain English, and so is his mother. So, do Jesus and Mary love the Jews? It's chosen people. You better believe Jesus and Mary love the Jewish people. Do Jesus and Mary love the other people in that region? Yes, big time. Very much. What we see today in this spectacle, this very sad, violent, evil spectacle of the terrible divisions in humanity, especially in that region of the world. You know what the word diabolic means? The study of words is enormously interesting. The study of words, or the origin of words, it's called etymology. Not to be confused with entomology, which is the study of insects. Etymology, study of words, the origin of words, very, very interesting. An example of how interesting and how revealing the study of words can be. I've often pointed this out in pointing out the woes and ills of the day. Pornography is one of the weapons the enemy uses, and the enemy is Satan, by the way. In polite society today, you can't talk about those things because you would likely be considered nutty. Since I'm already considered nutty, it is irrelevant if anybody else thinks I'm nutty. I already have that notable distinction, so it doesn't matter. Part of the doctrine of the faith concerns the existence and activity of Satan. Last week, I picked up the mail, and I was going through the mail, and there was a postcard, and it said this, direct quote, word for word. Soldier, comma. If 100 children per year were raped since the birth of Christ, how many would that be? Signed, Satan. That's the kind of mail I sometimes get on a regular basis. I mentioned that to Matt and Tamara, who run the office, and Matt said, yeah, Satan calls all the time. And people call up, and, literally. Well, that's kind of comical, but not really. It is, but it isn't. In a way it is, but in another way, it's real. He knows who I am. And he knows where I live. And some of the things we've been through in the last many years, I could stay here for the next 3 days, 24 hours a day, telling you stories. Some of the things we've been through. This is war. I don't know, I feel very deficient in trying to convey that reality to you, because I know, you go too far and think, he's a little nutty. Maybe he's too extreme. This is war. This battle is real. A battle not against human forces, as St. Paul said. A real spiritual warfare. Knock down, drag out, bare knuckles, brawl. And the bottom line is souls. Heaven, hell. Those are the only two ultimate destinations. And believe me, Las Vegas is not the number one preferred destination. Heaven is the number one preferred destination. But Bishop Sheen felt, we look at the world, this is one of the major problems we have. Radical Islam. And what do you do about it? This is a serious, serious problem. Remember, don't discount it and think it's nothing. I assure you it's something. Big time. And I want you to remember something. God has frequently used his enemies to chastise his friends. Throughout the course of history, read the Old Testament, God has frequently used his enemies to chastise his friends. Now, terrorists use the name of God. They claim that they're doing this for God and so forth. No one does evil like those who do it in the name of God. It's an old saying. And there's a lot of truth to it. You can get someone to believe that this is what God wants. Do you remember how Jesus referred to the devil? He referred to him as a liar and the father of lies, a murderer from the beginning. Gospel of John, 8th chapter. A liar, the father of lies, murderer from the beginning. And that's what we have today. That's what we have playing out in this spiritual combat, which frequently erupts and pierces the veil that separates the seen from the unseen. I look at this and I've absolutely no hope that human effort will ever straighten this out. I don't believe for a moment there will ever be peace in the Middle East. I don't believe it. Humanly speaking. I do believe it. Supernaturally speaking. For man, it's impossible. But for God, all things are possible. Bishop Sheen said, and I believe him, I think he was a prophet. I believe him. He'll be canonized someday, I think. He believed it would come through the Blessed Mother. I believe that independently, even before I read that, written by Bishop Sheen. I believe that. If you could ask me what will ultimately happen with Islam, be converted, of course. How will that happen? Through the Blessed Mother. Well, what about Israel? Oh, well, they'll be converted big time. How? Through the Blessed Mother. Well, why? She's the mother of life. She's the antidote to the death wish that humanity seems to exhibit in these times. She's the mother of life. What's life? Something? No, somebody. Jesus Christ equals life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus equals life. How did he enter time and space? How did he get that human nature? Blessed Mother. He came to us through Mary. In the whole history of salvation, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, interestingly enough, and I've quoted it many times, referring to human existence, says, human existence is the history of dour combat with the forces of evil. Wow, that's a pretty stark statement. That's a statement from the church, right in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Human existence is the history, the story of dour combat with the forces of evil. And the Blessed Mother has been in the middle of this combat, most interestingly enough, from beginning to end. You know, I could probably synthesize this entire talk, as I have other talks on the Blessed Mother, into a couple words. And those words would be, your mama wears combat boots. Simple enough. Very profound theology. Your mama wears combat boots. Now, in the old days when I was a kid, you know, that was kind of an insult. You know, little kids would try to get at each other, you know, and insult somebody. Look, your mama wears combat boots. Well, our mother does, in fact, wear combat boots, and I can prove it theologically and biblically. So, the first time I ever said that, I was preaching at the University of Notre Dame in Indiana, in front of an audience of thousands of people. And that's the first time I believe that ever came out of my mouth. And I didn't pre-plan it or anything. It just came out, and I said, yeah, your mama wears combat boots. And at the next conference I did, or a few times later, two ladies showed up, and they presented me with a gift. They had a very lovely statue of Our Lady, and yep. On her little maternal feet were combat boots. Then someone else designed a t-shirt with a beautiful picture of the Blessed Mother combat boot. Well, not meant to be insulting in any way. It's not meant to be in any way blasphemous. No. It's kind of a down-to-earth way of stating reality. You know, in the book of Genesis, the beginning of the Bible, first two chapters of Genesis concern creation. God creates everything and declares it to be good, very good. And then in the third chapter of Genesis, we have the fall of man. You know the story in the Garden of Eden. Serpent comes, and you remember what happens. The woman, Eve, the first woman, God says to the serpent, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers. And of course, that's the proto-evangelium, as it's called. Third chapter of the book of Genesis. Go all the way to the last chapter, the last book of the Bible, Revelation or the Apocalypse, chapter 12. And then a great sign appeared in the sky. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon at her feet, and a crown of 12 stars about her head. And what was she doing? Battle with the red dragon. Apocalyptic literature. You have to know how to read that. You have to read that according to the literary genre, which it is apocalyptic literature. But it doesn't mean nothing. It does mean something. And that imagery, from beginning to end, the church throughout the ages, and many of the fathers, doctors, and saints have interpreted that to mean that's the Blessed Mother that's involved in war with the enemy, with the devil. In the Quran, which of course Islam holds as its holy book, the 19th chapter of its 114 chapters is named after the Blessed Mother. She is one of only 8 people in the Quran to have a chapter named after them. She is the only woman in the Quran to be mentioned. Now, someone no less than Muhammad, the great prophet of Islam, said, speaking of his daughter, whose name was Fatima, no woman in heaven will be ever higher than Fatima except the Blessed Virgin Mary. So the authentic practitioners of Islam have a great devotion for the Blessed Mother. In the Quran itself, they refer to her as ever virgin. And they were staunch defenders of the fact of her perpetual virginity. It's a little known fact of history that one of the reasons that the Muslims hate the Jews so much is because of what they consider blasphemy when they denied the virginity of Mary. Pilgrimage sites like Fatima, some that haven't even been approved yet, like Medjugorje, have a huge number of Muslim pilgrims and have for centuries various pilgrimage sites. When the Muslim forces overran the Western world, all the way from the 7th, 8th century through medieval time, they destroyed everything, just ransacked everything in their path. In the Holy Land, they didn't touch the basilica, the shrine of St. Anne. They commemorated the birthplace of Mary. Wouldn't touch it out of reverence. No. They believe Jesus is a prophet. They don't believe he's God. They don't understand the Trinity. They don't understand a great number of things. There are many things that are distorted. In many respects, perhaps Islam has been hijacked by a radical element. But there's a doorway. There's a doorway which Bishop Sheen believed they would come through into the light. And that doorway is Mary, our mother. There's so many interesting things. I'm just beginning to study this. I don't claim to be an expert. I'm sure there are people in this room who are better experts than me on this subject matter. So I don't claim at all to be highly informed about this, but I'm just beginning to look into some of it. But very, very interesting when the Muslim forces overran Europe, and they really did. Study of a little history is helpful. There was a time when Islam was a huge temporal power, especially the Ottoman Empire, from Turkey, and they really, they just flattened the Western world. They occupied Spain, Portugal. I lived in Spain for 3 years. I traveled quite a bit through Spain, Portugal, other countries. And you can see the influence, the Muslim influence, all through their gates, especially in the gates or some of the architecture. You can see this, and it's still there to this day. I remember spending Christmas at Fatima. I spent 2 weeks, and there was no one there. Fatima was empty at Christmas time in 1991 it was. And my classmate and I spent 2 weeks there, celebrated Mass at the altar outside of the Basilica in Fatima. There was a little group of English pilgrims there and from London. And they were the only people that we ran into. And we would celebrate Mass for them in English every day. And then we got a free meal then. So, Fatima. Muhammad's daughters name. And then, during the Muslim occupation of Portugal, a prince of a certain town married a Muslim girl who, like so many Muslim girls, was named after the Prophet Muhammad's daughter, Fatima. You know, Fatima. And that, of course, is where Our Lady appeared then, at Fatima. There are so many things like that. I can't enumerate them all, but I'll just try to name a few. In the 8th century in Spain, a great religious treasure was buried to protect it from the invading Muslim forces. It was a very much venerated statue of the Blessed Mother, holding the divine child, Jesus. It had been a gift of Pope St. Gregory the Great to the Bishop of Seville, Bishop Leander. And after the overthrow, eventually, of the Muslim occupation, the image was dug up, they recovered it, in the year 1326. And then subsequent to that, the Blessed Mother appeared to a poor shepherd named Gil. And from that point on, that image was venerated very much. It became a very famous image or devotion in Spain. It was enshrined in a Franciscan monastery next to a river which had been named by the occupying Muslim forces. It was named, of course, in Arabic, the language they spoke, and it was named, that river was named the Wolf River. In Arabic, river, Guada, Wolf, Lupe, Guadalupe. That was the river. And that's where the monastery was, and that's where the statue of Our Lady was. And so in Spain, in the 14th century, they had the devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe. Our Lady of Guadalupe, an Arabic word. Now, you're aware of the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico, of course, big time. I know you know about that. And you know that Our Lady of Guadalupe is the patroness of the Americas, patroness of the unborn. You know the story of the Aztec people, how they worshipped a false god, it was a pagan, a stone serpent. And that stone serpent demanded human sacrifice. And tens of thousands of human beings were sacrificed to this stone serpent god. Well, the missionaries had no success whatsoever dealing with the Aztecs. No. I mean, a lot of missionaries got martyred. They didn't do well at all. And then you remember that a few of the Indians got converted. One of them was Juan Diego. He was an Aztec. And Our Lady appeared to him. And you know the story of the tilma and so forth. Well, Juan Diego, you know, he brought his garment, which had the image of Our Lady. She had appeared to him, talked with him. And he asked her, "Who are you?" And she said in his own language, the Aztec language, she said, "I'm the woman who crushes the head of the stone serpent." And in Aztec, that sounded very much like Guadalupe. And so he went and told the bishop the story. And the bishop, being from Spain, listened to the story, and when he said, "Well, who is this woman?" He said, "Well, I asked her." And she said, I'm the woman who crushes the head of the stone serpent. Well, he said that in the Aztec language. And it sounded just like Guadalupe to the bishop. And the bishop said, "Ah, Our Lady of Guadalupe." You see, back in Spain, in that original devotion, the first Our Lady of Guadalupe in Spain, they used to call her the little Moorish woman. That was what they called Our Lady of Guadalupe, because when she appeared to Gil, the shepherd, she appeared as a little Moorish Muslim woman. The little Muslim woman. The bishop said, "Of course, I know who it is. Yes, Our Lady of Guadalupe, Wolf River, Guadalupe." And so immediately it began the devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe. An Arabic word, Guadalupe, coming from in a sense, a tradition that was wrapped right up with Islam. Then later, in a decisive battle with the Muslim forces, the naval battle at Lepanto, the Christian Navy was a mess. Ragtag group of little boats, just horrible. And the Turkish Navy was the greatest naval power on the face of the earth in those days, and it didn't look good. And so the Pope, looking at this, seeing that the Christian Navy didn't have a chance, humanly speaking, he put out the word to the whole church to pray the rosary every day. Pray the rosary for the victory of our naval forces against the Muslim forces. And then in October 7th, now note the date, on October 7th, 1571, the decisive naval battle, which the Christian forces won. They were terribly outgunned. It was humanly impossible they could have won that battle, but they did. They did. Why? The power of the rosary. The power of the rosary. Pure and simple. They won that decisive victory because the Pope said, "Pray the rosary." Do you remember what Pope John Paul II said after 9/11? About the first thing he told the church, pray the rosary every day. He said, pray the rosary every day. I've been saying that since the day I was ordained, since before I was ordained. I've been preaching that. Pray the rosary every day. If you don't do anything else, if you don't listen to a word I say, let it go in one ear and out the other, don't pay any attention to it, but if you do that one thing, you'll be doing a lot. Pray the rosary every day. And I know many of you do. You're doing, and believe me, your function in the church, because of that, is heroic. It's enormous. Pray the rosary every day. Pray the rosary for the conversion of Islam and our Jewish brothers and sisters. I remember once I was having dinner with some friends in Wyoming, and there was a priest there, and at one point he said, "I get the impression you want everybody to be Catholic." As my Jewish friend Ruth would say, "And you wouldn't?" Yeah, of course. You know, why if I love my Muslim brother, my Jewish sister, how could I be happy if they have less than me? How can I be happy until they have the fullness of truth? I respect everybody's religion, and I do, I mean it. I don't say a negative word about anybody's religion, whether they're Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, hey, they worship God. That's more than I can say for an awful lot of people on the face of the earth. You know, some people worship Satan. We got enough enemies. Always come as a peacemaker. Now, you might say, yeah, you're a good one to talk about that. You know, you're kind of rough around the edges. And that may be true. But ultimately, you got to be a peacemaker. Now, sometimes the only way to peace is a black eye. I'm not a radical pacifist, and neither is our religion, by the way. You know, one of the first missions I ever received after I got my doctorate was from a cardinal who sent me to a certain place to straighten out a certain somewhat influential group of lay Catholics who were radical pacifists. I'll spare you some of the details, but it wasn't out yet in English, but I used the Catechism of the Catholic Church in Spanish at the time to teach the lesson, and I took the section on the fifth commandment. And there is a passage in there which is very important, and basically it says that those who have responsibilities for others, like say a father of a family, a governor of a state, president of a nation, such people not only have a right, but an obligation to defend those in their charge. And so a right to self-defense becomes, it's part of our religion. Now, you don't want to abuse that. That can be abused, of course. But they didn't accept it. They said, no. I said, well, I gave them an example. I said, well, what if you go out to dinner and you're walking home with your wife and children, and a thug, a bully, jumps out of the bushes with a butcher knife. He's going to rape your wife and murder your children. Well, according to you, you couldn't do anything because you say your religion would prevent that. And of course, they always say, well, what would Jesus do? And I said he'd kick butt. It is sheer stupidity and absolute lack of common sense to say that under certain circumstances you wouldn't defend those you have responsibility for. Of course you would. You defend them. Part of the truth. But human nature being what it is, we frequently don't know where the lines are. You know, what is legitimate self-defense can be pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, and pretty soon it becomes a lot more than it's meant to be. And defense turns into aggression, and you know, it's hard. Human beings are not perfect. We have a fallen nature. We make mistakes. We make mistakes. And there are so many forces pulling and pushing at us. And don't forget, we have active enemies. The devil. And millions, no doubt, of fallen angels. So we're caught between a rock and a hard place, so to speak. We need help. We need a lot of help. Bishop Sheen in 1952 believed that Our Lady would convert Islam. I believe she will convert Islam and Israel and all the pagans in the world. I believe that she will be the doorway through which people come to Jesus. Jesus came to us through her. Makes sense that we should go to Jesus likewise through her. Why? Because he wills it so. Often people will disagree with me, and that's fine. They don't have to accept what I say. But they'll say, give me one good reason that I should believe what you say. Give me one good reason why I should have devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And it's very simple. I say, well, if she's good enough for Jesus, she's good enough for you. Period. That's all. Don't complicate a simple thing. Now, I'll say that again with all the conviction I can muster in your face. If she's good enough for Jesus, she's good enough for you, and I don't care who you are. You're not bigger and badder than Jesus Christ. Period. If she indeed is good enough for God, she's good enough for you. She's the mother of God. You say, God doesn't have a mother. Well, is Jesus God? Yes. Is Jesus Christ the Son of the Blessed Virgin Mary? Yes. Therefore, she's the mother of God. She's not the mother of divinity per se, but you have to understand the theological principle of what we call, you don't have to remember these words, but the communicatio idiomatum, the communication of idioms. You don't have to remember that. Remember this, though. Remember this, though. Jesus Christ is Lord. Jesus is God. He's a divine person, second person of the Blessed Trinity. He assumed a human nature, so he's true God and true man. Through the power of the Holy Spirit and the fiat of the Blessed Virgin, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. She is the mother of God. If she's good enough for him, she's good enough for us. Period. That's the end of the story. And you know, and that's where I always leave it. I don't argue. I never argue. I don't get involved in arguments. I'm too old. Man, I'm too old to argue. I don't know. When I was young, I used to fight. You know, when I was young, man, Johnny's my name and fighting is my game. Come on. That's all. Not anymore. I'm not young. I'm older. I'm too tired to fight. Too tired to fight. But I do anyway. Good enough for Jesus. She is good enough for us. And I just leave it at that. And if they want to argue and they don't like it, fine, fine. You know, I can't change their mind. All I can do is state the case. I learned a long time ago, all I have to do, some seminarians not too long ago asked me, Father, what's the secret of preaching? What's the secret? How can we do what you do? I said, show up for work. Man, show up for work. That's all I've ever done. Show up for work. I can't do it. I can't change your mind. I can't change anybody's mind or heart. I can't do it. I know I can't do it. I don't have the strength to do that. I don't have the power to do that. But I know God can do that. And God often does do that. I just show up for work. You know, I'm an instrument. You know, like you got a garden, you might need a rake or a shovel or a hoe. That's an instrument, a tool. You know, it's like my exercise equipment, you know. You could look at that and say, nice tools, nice equipment, you know. And meanwhile, you know, I got a really nice spot behind my garage at my house, and it's a perfect, nice rectangular spot, great space for a garden. Right now, it looks like something Tarzan might live in. You know, he could swing on vines in there. It just, you know, I mean, it's jungle in there. If I picked up those tools and used them and made a nice garden plot there, it'd be okay. I could grow a bunch of stuff in there. You know, someday if I ever get time to be home, I might do that. The longest journey still requires that the first step be taken. You know, show up for work. You know, mom, dad, sister, anybody, pastor, show up for work. Oh, but I just don't feel I can do anything. I don't. My people are just they're hard-hearted. My kids, they're so, you know, just set in their ways. Show up for work. Now, the first thing you got to do is pray. That's what you got to do. If you're not spending a lot of time praying, and by the way, in all this warfare I've been talking about, I've been talking about this spiritual warfare, using analogies. This is the only one that matters. Believe you me, nothing will get better in Iraq, Afghanistan, Lebanon, Africa. Nothing's going to get better in any of those places. There'll be a bunch more springing up, like brush fires popping up all over the world. Unless that unseen war inside of human hearts, unless that is fought, the war in the mind, the war in the heart, the will, unless we fight and win that war one person at a time, all the rest of it isn't going to straighten out and get better. When I enlisted in the Army in 1967, we were just changing small arms. The M14 rifle had been the preferred small arm of the United States military when I first went in. But very quickly, within a couple of weeks, I was right there at the transition point when the M16 rifle came in. We all got nice new shiny M16 rifles, and we quickly had to learn how they worked. We had to be able to take them apart. Field strip is what that's called. Take them down to small parts so you can clean them and so forth. And then we had to do it blindfolded in the dark. And we had to do it with the AK-47, which was the preferred small arm of the enemy, in the dark. Take it apart and put it back together. In other words, a soldier needs to know his weapons inside and out. Any questions? Ain't rocket science. That's the preferred small arm of the Army I'm talking about. This is the M16 of our mother's Army. Now, like a good soldier, I wear dog tags. You know what dog tags are, right? You know them little things you have your name, rank, and serial number on? I'm wearing dog tags, man. It's called the brown scapular. I've been wearing my dog tags ever since I got serious about my religion. The rosary and the scapular. Good soldier won't leave home without them. Have your identification on, have your weapon at hand always. St. Pio, Padre Pio, frequently used to say, "Bring me my weapon, bring me my weapon." And the brothers would say, "Weapon, weapon, what are you talking about? Weapon? You're a Franciscan. You can't have weapons. Bring me my rosary." He understood. He understood. Padre Pio was a great warrior. St. Francis himself was a fantastic warrior. He even had a mystical vision showing him on a battlefield. And he had to do battle with a ferocious enemy. It's a different kind of warfare. Different kind of warfare. Where weakness is strength, where humility is power, where prayer wins the day. New way of thinking. Got to put on the mind of Christ. Now we have to start because we're kind of like the advance movement. We're the equivalent of what the Special Forces or the Rangers would be. I've always considered myself more Special Forces type. That's what I was naturally, and that's what I am spiritually. Special Forces involved in unconventional warfare. I've always been unconventional. I mean, you look at me. You think for a minute now, and I'm not bragging here. I'm just laughing. You look at me. I mean, and then compare me to the average good priest that we have, and you say it's like my aunt Louise says. Aunt Lou says, "You're a piece of work." You're a piece of work, boy, and she's right. You know, I am unconventional. You know, my style is unconventional. That's the only one I have. I don't know how to do it. Other ways are good. Other ways are effective. But I don't know how to do anything that other way. You know, we all have to do what God gives us to do. And so that's what I do. I do it the way God gave me to do it. I only understand war and the ways of war as the little boy playing with the little toy soldiers who said, Lord, don't let me die in bed, let me go out with my boots on in combat. That's the only thing I understood. And grace builds on nature. And so, in this troubled time, in this day and age where all these wars are popping up, all this enmity, all this anger and hatred, the real war is unseen. It's spiritual. That's the real combat. That's what matters. Unconventional warfare. Man, grab the devil right by the throat and rip it out. In plain English. And the only way you can do that, I can't do that. You know, devil, he's a fallen angel. Bigger than me. I'm little. I'm like the 80-pound weakling. In all my life, the devil has been telling me, I'm going to destroy you. He still does. In many ways. You'll be in hell with me forever. Oh, you should see some stuff that happens to me on Thursday night before I got to fly Friday morning. Oh, he does it. I'm going to destroy you. I will have you. Now, I don't converse with the devil. But I just say one thing. Take it up with my mama. That's all. My mama wears combat boots. Jesus gave her that power. She doesn't have any power of her own. Her son gave her that power to do battle with the enemy. She is that woman that God said, I'll put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers. And then in the book of Revelation, the woman clothed with the sun, with the moon at her feet. Ever see that moon? Crescent moon. Ever notice that? Ever see the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe? That's an image that was miraculous. You ever see what's under her feet? A crescent moon. That's right. And that woman will win the day for her son. And they'll all come running. All the Muslims, all the Jews, and all the Christians gathered under one banner, under the mantle of their mother. The same one mother, the mother of God, the mother of the church, the mother of us all. If we will live in the light of that knowledge, if we will fight with the strength of that reality, we cannot lose. Pray the rosary every day. Pray the rosary every day without fail. I know there's 1,001 excuses why you can't do it. Just do it. Man, just do it. It's just like me and my stinking exercise equipment. Man, I look at that, oh boy, I bet I could get strong if I mess with that stuff. I bet I could get strong. Just do it. Pick up your weapons, soldiers, and fight the good fight. God love you.